Hi guys, so I'm here with your second lesson for algebra. Hopefully yesterday wasn't too bad. Don't forget that if you have any questions or anything like that to check in with Miss Mejia or myself just so that we can help you guys out as much as we can. Today we're going to continue with quadratic equations and parabola and just a little bit more on graphing and other important aspects of them. Yesterday we learned that a quadratic equation looks something like y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are just different numbers. And we also talked about the turning point of a parabola or the vertex. We're going to continue talking about the vertex today and how we can use the vertex to figure out other important pieces of information of our parabolas. So the vertex of our parabola is the highest or the maximum point of the parabola, or it can also be the lowest or the minimum point of your parabola, depending how what your parabola looks like. So if your parabola looks something, or the graph of your quadratic equation looks something like this, where it's a smiley face opening upwards, then your vertex, which would be this point right here, is the very lowest point on your graph, right? Is the lowest point on your graph, which means that point is going to be a minimum. However, if your graph looks something like this, what we have on the other side, where we have a sad face or a frowny face, your vertex, which is this point right here, is the peak of that mountain or the peak of that graph, which means that is the maximum, that is the highest point on your graph. Okay? Now, our parabola is actually going to help us determine what we call the axis of symmetry. Okay, and the axis of symmetry just simply divides our graph into two equal parts, okay, or into two equal pieces. So if I look at my graph right here, okay, here is my vertex, and if I draw a line going right through my vertex, if I draw a line, this green line that I'm drawing, a line that goes right through my vertex will cut my parabola into two equal parts, right? We have two equal pieces on the left and the right, and that line that cuts our parabola in half, going right through the vertex, right through the middle end of our graph, that's actually called the axis of symmetry. Okay, so if we do the same thing on this graph that we have on the right hand side, that line that goes right through the vertex of our graph cuts that parabola into two equal parts, and that line in green is also called the axis of symmetry. Now, when we are drawing the axis of symmetry, the way that we write the axis of symmetry is actually by writing x is equal to some number. And that's because the axis of symmetry is also the x value of the vertex. So for example, let's pretend that our vertex here was the point 2, 5, okay? If I were to draw a line going right through that point, okay, going right through my vertex, the x value at that point is 2. That means that the axis of symmetry for that graph is the line x is equal to 2. Okay? So if, for example, let's say that this point right here was, let's see, negative 3, comma 6, I don't know. Then that means that this line right here, the axis of symmetry, is just the line x is equal to negative 3. So the axis of symmetry, the way we write it, is always x is equal to some number. Okay? And just to further emphasize that and to further show you that, we're going to do an example where we're going to graph and then we're going to determine our vertex and our axis of symmetry. So we're going to take this equation. You're going to go ahead and put it in your calculator, whether you're using the graphing calculator app or Desmos, and you're going to look at your table. So first what we're going to do is we're going to look at our table and we're going to look for our vertex. We always want to start by graphing our vertex. So if I scroll up and down the table over here, if I scroll up and down my table over here, I'm looking to see, as I showed you yesterday, at what point do my y values start to repeat? At what point do I start to get the same y values back again? So in our table here, you will see that after the point 1, 4, you start to get the same y values back, right? So you're at 0, you're at 3, then you're at 4, then you're back to 3, back to 0, and so on and so forth. So at the point where you start to repeat the same y values, that is going to be your vertex. Okay, so we're going to start by plotting our vertex, which is 1, 4, right over here. Then I'm going to go ahead and add points on both sides of my graph. So I'm going to add -1, 0, which is right over here. I'm going to add 0, 3, which is right here. I also have 2, 3, and I also have 3, 0. On your graph, what you want to do is you want to add all the points that fit. I'm not adding all of the points here just for sake of time so that I don't make this video too long. But on your graph, you will have a lot more points that fit on your graph, and you want to graph as many of them so that your graph is as accurate as possible. I also want to point out that when you're graphing parabolas or quadratic equations, the shapes that you should be drawing is a U, right? So this is a U if it's opening up, or this is a U if it's opening down. This is not a U. This is not a U, none of that is U, right? So your graph should look something very similar to this. I'm seeing a lot of different things that look like a lot of different shapes that are not U shapes. So make sure that, I know it's a little difficult because sometimes some of you guys are not doing this on paper or you're doing it on a computer or something like that. But you want to try your best to make it as a U-shaped graph as possible, okay? Not a V, not a horseshoe or anything like that, but a U, okay? A U, some looking something like that. So now that I've graphed my equation, we're going to answer the second question, which says what is a vertex and is it a maximum or a min? We determined already that my vertex is the point 1, 4, right? That's the point where everything starts to repeat all over again. And this point right here, that's like the peak of my mountain. That's the highest point on my graph. So this is a maximum. Now it's asking me for my axis of symmetry. So again, if I were to draw a line going right through the middle of my graph, going right through the vertex, okay, that line will pass through an x value of 1. Or if I look at my vertex, right, this is my x and this is my y, the x value there is 1. So my axis of symmetry, is just the line x is equal to 1. Okay, it's the x value of your vertex is also going right through 1 on your x-axis if you draw it yourself. Okay, so that's all you're probably going to need for this task. If you have any questions, just make sure to send me a message. Don't forget to draw your arrows. Don't forget to add as many points as you can. And don't forget that your graphs should be looking like a U-shaped graph. Hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.